Ladies and gents, welcome back. We are having a heck of a week here in Canada. And to talk about this once again, here is Marty up north. Welcome back, my man.
Clyde, how's it going, man?
It's going. You and I both went out to protests today to check them out and see what's going on.
Yep.
Tell me a bit about, okay, so first and foremost, this is the million person march across Canada, and this is for parental rights. People are upset with the SOGI, as they call it, the the sexuality stuff that they're teaching in schools, and they're trying to do it behind parents' backs and not telling children not to tell your parents that you're talking about these things. Of course.
Can you imagine? I mean, just think of that sentence, right? That's the perfect sentence, right? Like, hey, don't tell your dad this. Like, that's the number one warning. Like, if somebody ever says to a kid, don't tell your dad, whew, that's bad right there. So yeah, like that's the kind of legislation that they're trying to pass, right? Some sort of legislation they want to give they don't want teachers telling the parents what's going on, in a nutshell. But yeah,
and I think that's the line in the sand, and this is where the nuance and the misrepresentation come from largely when it comes to these politicians that are speaking out about it. They're speaking out about it as if it's some transgender issue or if it's some LGBT issue. No, the parents that are upset are that we're not being informed about what's being discussed with our children, and you're doing it intentionally behind parents' backs. So when that happens, people get you don't get between a bear and its cubs, right? It's just common sense.
No, and it's a matter of it's parental rights. It is what it is. I mean, as a parent, I have a responsibility and an obligation once I have children, but I also have rights. And I don't think it can go both ways. So, you can't be picking and choosing too often what the rights and the obligations are. So I'm obligated to raise children and make them productive members of society. And in so doing, I also have rights, and I have the right to know what's going on with my children. That's a fundamental right that we've had forever and ever. I can show up at the school if I want to and sit in the class and see what you're teaching them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's what the protest was. It wasn't a protest. It was a march, right? It was labeled as a march, and it was a march. The target was to get 1 million people. So here in Calgary, I went today. I would say we had about 2,000 people. I'm not an expert at counting, but you can stand in one spot while the parade's walking by, and you can go, okay, it's 10 wide and it's moving by. And so I estimate about 2,000 people. And it was an amazing mix of people. Like there was, they were parents. First of all, they were parents. That was so obvious. I mean, there was lots of families there. There was parents and their children, and a very cross-sectional mix. So there was Christians and Muslims. There was new immigrants, old Canadians. There was nationalities. I mean, I don't know them all, but there was Chinese. There was Ethiopians. There was Moroccans. It was so diverse. And all had, very just chanting. The most common chant was "Leave our kids alone," which is fair. That's how I would summarize it. And for here in Calgary, I've said this to a lot of people. Calgarians don't protest very often. Like I'm an Albertan, and I've been in Calgary I've been in Calgary 3 times in my life, but this latest stretch is about going on 13 years now, and we generally, downtown is a busy core. People work and don't protest. Mm-hmm. And for even a couple of thousand people to come out really sends a message that, this is an issue that's pushing people over the top. It's a cool day in Calgary. It's a work day, and people took time out of their work to come and protest. So that alone sends a big message. How was it in Vancouver? I can imagine it must have been bigger in Vancouver.
It was quite large in Vancouver, and in fact, so there's a bit of confusion on the flyer. So the flyer said walk out at 9, and then I think it was a meetup at 11, and then the march was at 1. So people weren't sure like where the walkout and that other stuff was. So when I went with my wife and kids, by the way, because I was expecting, it says bring your kids, all that stuff, but we kind of had a tag along sort of thing going on. So if something kind of gets haywire, okay, you guys go over there, go to that place, go have a coffee and hang out while I go check out what's happening and report on it. Now, immediately it became one of those situations. So early on, there was hardly any attendees. It was way hours before it was meant to go. But I guess the counter protesters had figured out the same thing. Like, oh, it says 11. So they all showed up at 11. Mind you, there was only about a dozen people there at 11 o'clock a.m. And the march wasn't until 1 o'clock. Now, the media was already there, and these people dressed all in black and being really intimidating showed up to intimidate this like group of 12 people, and very loud. Wow. Took over the space that was designated, and you know you have to have permits for this stuff, right? So it was designated for this march. They took over that space, and then when the people did show up, the people were wondering like, what's going on here? And of course, the media runs with stories like this, for example: counter marchers outnumber Soji protesters on Vancouver's street plazas. They call them Soji protesters because they don't want to say parental right protest, because that's essentially what it is. It's and this is what it's been advertised as, for the children and parental rights, but they want to give it the acronyms, or they're against something. So these counter protesters, which were largely organized by unions, which we can get into that.
Before we get into that, I mean, it's similar, different in Calgary. You know, I'll be definitely very well organized, very, very small counter protest group. So in Calgary, the way it was done is we had two groups across the street from each other downtown. Now, the march side had sort of a plaza. They were next to a government building, so they had access to a plaza so they could spread out. And then the counter protesters were across the street, and all they had was a sidewalk. But they're, you know, all they needed was about 100 or maybe 200 feet of that sidewalk. So like the counter protesters were outnumbered 50-1 in Calgary.
Yeah. And
then the police did a fantastic job of organizing, keeping the group separate. So kudos to the Calgary police. Although I'm still, you know, topic for another day, but they're still a force. Like the average police officer that comes out to these things is just really scary, like just really scary, you know, like carrying guns and just so much ammunition and masks and stuff like that. But anyways, but to one of your points though, here in Calgary, no media. I walked around for 4 hours. I didn't see a CTV camera. I didn't see a CBC camera or any camera like that. So how they can even report, I have no idea. What anything they report can't be factual because they weren't there. But
so the media,
Rebel was
the media was reporting, and there was independent sources. So I met Lauren Southern. She was there. Yeah. She was reporting. Also, Dan Dix from Press for Truth, he was there, and he was reporting as well. So there was a bunch of people that were there for reporting, as well as, you know, they don't. I noticed they don't use their logos anymore like they used to. So they have the big cameras and all of that stuff, but you know they're a mainstream source, but you don't know which one per se. I couldn't point out which ones.
I had kind of the same weird observation here too. Like after the fact, you know, well, I got recognized. You probably get recognized. So I had lots of people, you know, everybody who said hi. By the way,
people are so nice when they recognize you. By the way, like
people are so nice. And Clyde, I'm associated with you now. Like it's incredible how many people said, "Hey, Marty," and then I turn around and then they want to chat, shake hands, and they go, "I love your podcast with Clyde." I'm like, "Well, it's Clyde's podcast." So yeah, that's so fun to hear. But you know, then I get back home and I look on my Twitter feed and I see all these other Twitter personalities that were obviously there, and I'm like, oh man, they're publishing videos and they were like literally 50 feet away from me and I didn't even see them. So people are kind of staying low key. I stayed low key a little bit. I was worried, but it turned out to be, in Calgary, a non-event. There was no clashing between groups, although I hear that in places like Ottawa and other places, there was some clash.
Yeah, there was some clash that I heard of. But like again, I said, they're reporting on clashes in Vancouver, but I didn't witness anything. I saw aggression coming from these people wearing black on the counter protest side. Now, mind you, the reporters were all there when there was still like only people starting to gather. Now it gathered and it got quite large. It got large to the point where I believe that the protest itself was larger than the counter protest, and then they did they did the march, and we joined along with them. Walked down. I got footage of it where there was just so many people on the street. It was really something to watch. I wonder if I have something loaded up here that I can just show here. I believe I do. I have this little bit of footage here, just a visual here. Now, this lineup went all
look at
the
that
way down the
crowd,
street.
right? Look at that crowd. Look at how diverse that crowd is. That's amazing.
It's people from everywhere. It's great.
And
it's awesome.
There was an MP. There was an MP in Halifax today that literally tweeted out, after the crowd, like calling this like the right wing whatever crazies, and it's like. And people posted pictures like this under that guy's tweets, going like, "Come on, man, you're
this right wing?
Really, this is this is not right wing. This is not radical. This is not dangerous. This is very, very, very peaceful protest. Not even a protest. It's a march. It's a march."
I got an opportunity.
Now here in Calgary, the mayor went out of his way. I don't know if she did it on purpose, but I don't think it was a coincidence. We walked by the city hall, and lo and behold, there's big construction going on, and there's big cement trucks blocking the way.
Of course.
Yeah, and that's the disappointment for me today, is that no politicians came out, and as much as I love Pierre Poilievre, I think Pierre could have come out, and I don't think, and I wouldn't have wanted Pierre to come out on one side or the other. I would have wanted Pierre to come out and say, "I'm here as a politician to hear both sides." And I think politicians who picked a side today missed an opportunity. They should have come out just to listen. I'm sure they listened behind closed door or behind their wall, they're in their office, but a lot of them missed. Of course, the usual ones came out. So did Jagmeet come out in your neck of the woods, or no? I guess he's in Vancouver.
That was actually
he's in Ottawa this week,
right in front of the PMO's office.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Now let's talk quickly. I mean, leading into this, we were worried. There was a lot of worry that we saw the memo that got leaked of the unions trying to get organized for this, right?
Which
is a what do you call it? A relevant topic to this. I mean, I found it worried me that unions were getting organized. We could talk about that, but I'm glad in the end that they were unorganized and didn't succeed here in Calgary anyways. Did you sense that unions were successful as part of the counter protest in Vancouver?
They had their banners out. Yeah, I'm not kidding.
Wow.
They had their banners out. There was all kinds of banners that were flying across Canada in some of these. I think I closed one of the windows, but I had a picture of one guy who was in Ottawa who had it was the Marxist.ca association, and they came out in support of the counter protest. It was the communists were out.
Did you?
The communists were there.
But did you see banners like, say, CUPE,
yes.
the Canadian Union? Wow. See,
they were out.
That's insane, man. That's not their purview. That's not what they should be doing.
No.
Right? If the protest was, I said this to somebody today, if the protest was against teachers directly, let's say there was a protest against teachers, sure, then the teachers union I could see the teachers union coming to the defense and somehow or other. But this is a protest of parents protesting a government policy, mm-hmm. and then you got a union that's taking a side. That's
a public sector union on top of that. The CUPE is a public sector union. And somebody on Twitter mentioned, why can't we, give them the Bud Light treatment? I replied to that person. I said, well, first off, Bud Light is something that's just voluntarily sold in the marketplace. You can choose not to buy it. But we're talking about a public sector union, which gets their dues from employees, not by choice, by force. An
employee can't opt out, I don't think, right?
Well, the employees cannot opt out. They have to become members as soon as they become employees, and then they owe these dues, mandatory dues. And not only that, as the money that they get on their earnings are brought to you by taxes, which are mandatory. These are all coercion. It's all
I mean, me personally, I've never worked in a union, never belonged to a union, never worked in the civil sector. So, but I'm. I blame a lot of unions for a lot of things. I mean, personally, this is not the topic of this show, but I think unions have outlived their useful purpose. Did they do useful stuff in the past? Absolutely. I think they've outlived their useful purpose, and they contribute to, they're dragging down the economy. We're becoming unproductive because of unions, and here in Alberta, like, you got people that keep saying, we need to improve healthcare this way, this way, this way. And trust me, every time we try and do it, the unions interfere. Now, and then I thought unions would lose a lot of popularity during COVID because to me, they didn't defend their members.
No,
I mean, when management said we're going to adopt the mandates, and a certain member of the union said, well, I don't want to be, I don't want to take the jab. I would have thought that one of the union responsibilities would be to come to the defense of that individual member, and they completely didn't. No. And I thought, okay, well, that's the beginning of the end for unions. But somehow or other, they didn't affect them. So now I'm looking at this going, are people going to finally wake up? I mean, if you're I don't know, if you're part of a steam fitters union in Alberta or in British Columbia, and you're a father and you are against this, and then you find out that your union was counter protesting you. Holy smokes!
And you were paying for it with your dues, and that's paying for them. That's the biggest. That's the most egregious part about this whole thing. And this should be enough to get union workers who are parents who do believe that the parents should have their rights to stand up against their own union representatives, and hopefully there could be like, even if it doesn't disband the union, but keep the unions, but change the people at the helm of these unions. Obviously, they're ideologically
but now
motivated.
you know why the unions are doing this, right? Because whether it's the unions or the institutions or the government, they've been infiltrated by these radicals. Yeah. So, you got the government gets infiltrated by the radical, and then the radicals manage to take over the agenda. The radicals have taken over schools. And so now when we're protesting against the schools, we're basically protesting against radicals. And the reason the union's getting involved is because the union is also taken over by radicals. And so so it's a group of radicals defending another group of radicals is what it is. And so the unions should pay attention to this. We're not coming after the unions, just like I'm not coming after the school, just like I'm not coming after government. I'm not here to overthrow government and destroy schools and get rid of unions. I'm here to clean the swamp and get rid of the radicals that have infiltrated these institutions. That's what we want.
This is why my main target in all of this has been to target the average union due payer. And people who are, just doing
open their eyes.
Yeah, open your eyes, know what's happening, and know what you're paying for. These are things that are on your dime, that are coming to fight the rights that you ought to have in this country. And it is radicals. Well, and radicals gets us into the next topic. This was the hate gate scenario that just unfolded last week, and this was big. I had Kareem Assad on the channel. She came and spoke about it. It's quite a big topic to dive into. So we were only able to really touch the tip of the iceberg there. But she has her article out that's fantastic. Really spells it out. But it really has to do with this. I kept slipping and calling it the Southern Poverty Law Center because essentially that's what it is. Is the anti-hate network in Canada that has been basically propagandizing.
The Southern Poverty Law Network is an American group that's been around for about 20 years, but they provide seed money to the Canadian
anti-hate network is the name of it.
Anti-hate network, anti-hate alliance. Some of the they're and when you dive into these institutions, you realize that they're just activist groups, well funded, who pretend to be something that they're actually not. I mean, the Southern Poverty Center is a funny one, right? Do you remember the story of? Remember when Pierre Poilievre, the story broke out that he was using the men going their own way? He had put the tags in. MGTOW tags in his Facebook, or not his Facebook, his YouTube.
The tags in the analytic tags.
The tags, right? And you and I know how tags work, right? I mean, tags aren't even a part of YouTube anymore. And so somebody had hacked his account and put him in there. I don't know what. And then the story mysteriously breaks. And it was Rachel Gilmore, and it was
before that.
Go ahead.
I don't know if it was he got hacked. It was like 2 years before. or so, where MGTOW was a big popular phrase until the left really demonized the phrase. So MGTOW was just men going their own way, men fed up with the way things are going, and then it turned into something else, and so it was
but that story broke. The Poilievre story broke specifically. It was CTV and it was Rachel Gilmore, and then Rachel was citing the Southern Poverty Law Center. Global. You're right, but she was using the Southern Poverty Center as a source. I'm like, oh my God, it's a bought and paid for source. It's all it is. And that's what I think, that's basically the story that Karima broke, which is in Canada, it's the same thing, right? So when Trudeau needed an excuse to invoke the Emergency Measures Act, he turned to his politicians, said, find something for me. And Mendocino was on the stage all the time going, well, the law enforcement told us this, which was a lie, is what Karima broke that. We knew it was a lie. It was a lie. And now she's breaking really through the Freedom of Information. Good on her. I mean, that's so hard to do, right? To get those to send in those requests and get that information. And she's finding out that the RCMP had, it's all coming around. We talked about this. We talked about this when we were watching the Emergencies Measures Inquiry, 3 months ago, 4 months ago. I mean, there are civil servants that were saying, hey, whoa, like, I'm not going under the bus for this one. And so this story is not over. This story is not over.
Well, and these are the groups that come up with these insane new definitions for words and terms, like felt violence or perceived violence. We heard Bell, the interim police chief for Ottawa, coming onto the stand at the POEC, saying that term. He kept saying violence, until he was actually questioned by cross-examining attorneys that said, can you define violence, the violence that you're saying? And he says, oh, well, I meant felt perceived violence. When I say violence, I mean, people are, they feel like a truck driver around them could be intimidating. And it's a new way of messing with the language. It's very Orwellian. If anyone's read the book 1984, this is what George Orwell really pointed out, is the fact of if you can bastardize or change the language, you can really manipulate people into believing that one thing is what it isn't.
Yep. Yeah, no, this is just another story that breaks it. When Karima talks to you or talks to me, she's preaching to the converted. I mean, when I meet her and talk to her, it's like, oh, perfect. You're actually confirming with very good evidence what we suspected. And and it's not just the government and the hate groups, it goes on everywhere. I mean, there's similar, when you hear, again, I'm having a memory blank, but if I'm an environmentalist and I want a report that shows that farming salmon in BC is hazardous, I can go to one of the environmental groups and get a report from them, and then use them as a site and cite them. So the environmental, it's part of the strategies that radicals use, and they hide it as a term, like what is the exact term in Canada? It was called, what's that group called?
Was the anti-hate
network?
The anti-hate network.
Yeah, the anti-hate network. And of course, it sounds great, right? I mean, it came from the anti-hate network. It must be real. No,
because they're against hate, right? No. Yeah, so it's stated in their goals that,
and only one side is against hate, apparently. Like, that's the other one that's really weird today. Like today, you've seen those posters today. Like, you guys are, I hate you guys. It's like, you're anti-hate, but you're just holding up a poster that says "I hate you." I'm confused.
That was the chant from the counter protesters.
I'm not confused. In fact, sorry,
you're not confused.
I'm pretty. But I get it. So they're confused.
This was one of the chants from the counter protesters at the event today, and they kept chanting it. There's no space for hate. But they occupied a big space with their vitriol and hatred towards a bunch of people that they refuse to even have a conversation with.
Well, I'll tell you what, the police in Calgary blocked that sidewalk. So even Joe Citizen could not walk along the counter protest side. So if you appeared completely innocent and you just walked up and said, I want to go that way, the police said go that way, and they directed you towards the march side. So even the police here in Calgary knew that the counter protesting group was disingenuous. They were not there with good intentions.
Wow. Yeah.
And then and these kinds of things, I hate that kind of stuff, like language, when people say, like Antifa, for instance, right? Like, well, they're anti-fascists. I'm like, oh my God, they're as anti-fascist as North Korea is democratic, right? And North Korea's name is what is North Korea's official name?
It's the Democratic Republic of North Korea.
Well, then obviously North Korea must be democratic.
Yeah, the People's Republic of China, right? It's the people that run that country, not
absolutely. So come on, like, yeah, but that narrow, low IQ narrative works with so many people.
It does.
Like people I mean, we got a prime minister who lives off of that. He lives off of that, right? Making these weird platitudes that are unfounded, and everybody goes, "Oh, hey, must be true."
Absolutely. And speaking of the prime minister, he's in a lot of hot water for a lot of different issues, but he's trying to drum stuff up with another country. He's done, I guess he's divided enough Canadians. He doesn't know where to go with that. So he thought, why don't I divide one of our biggest trading partners with all of Canada?
I did a tweet on that. I remember doing a tweet about that, like, who's Trudeau divided, right? Like French versus English, East versus West, parents versus kids, new immigrants versus old stock. And now he's pitting us against another country, but weirdly, India is an easy target because Canada and India have great relations, but there's been some interesting history between our two countries when it comes to these weird allegations of terrorism, right? I mean, the Lockerbie disaster comes to mind and whatnot. So, but aside from all that, Trudeau's picking a weird moment to suddenly bring out these. I think they're pretty.
They're heavy allegations.
Bold allegations.
They're heavy allegations.
What's that?
They're heavy.
They're very heavy allegations. Very, very heavy.
And they're very flimsy at this point. I mean, he's not coming forward with evidence. So here's an interesting point: is the fact that we've had years and years of CSIS telling the PMO there is infiltration from the CCP in our government. There has been compromises. There has been situations where they've intervened in our elections. There are lots of situations here, and this isn't flimsy evidence. This isn't like we suspect that this might be happening. No, they have hard evidence, and they want to get to the bottom of it. They've been trying to talk to the PMO, but they don't have the purview to go and talk with the opposition party. Trudeau's had this information for all of this time. Why now is he coming forward with allegations of and these are serious implications that a foreign government came in and killed a Canadian national, which is also in question, by the way. And I mean, we can get into that.
The simple answer to your why now is he's literally like, he's got to distract because, inflation numbers came out, as we've been saying, for week after week after week. There's no good news for him, right? Inflation numbers are bad. Housing numbers are bad. His popularity is dipping. And so he needs a distraction. But now he's at the point where, like, okay, what am I going to use for a distraction? He goes to his Rolodex and he's like, okay, I'll use this one. And he doesn't even think about the consequences, right? So
massive consequences.
He picked India. To your question, I mean, like, why now? You just visited there. So is it because of that? Okay. Why this? Because in a sense, this could be if this proves true, there's a link to Jagmeet Singh. Like, it's a weird link, but Jagmeet Singh is a supporter of the group that supposedly this guy who was assassinated belonged to. Mm-hmm. So in a way, he's throwing some light on Jagmeet that probably Jagmeet doesn't want. But then I'm confused because last week this week he also threw Jagmeet the huge bone because Trudeau is in so much deep shit right now. He's like, oh, I got to distract people from inflation. I know what? I'm going to invite the head of Loblaws and I'm going to slap him on the wrist. I'm like, well, then you're doing exactly what Jagmeet's been doing. So now you're giving Jagmeet some.
I want to dive into
validity.
that. I want to dive into that topic, but I'm staying on the India thing for now because I think there's a lot of meat there.
does Trudeau think too far when he's doing this? No, God, he's like, I'm sure when he said this in the House of Commons, I mean, it has to be planned. He can't just do it off the cuff. But I'm sure there's people going, "Oh my God, what have you done? Like, what have you done? Right? What have you done?" But he doesn't think of consequences. I'm probably oversimplifying it at this point in time, but it's a nasty allegation that tries to get him acts as a distraction, and he didn't think about the whole giant implication of what he's saying.
Well, and here's the thing. So before anyone has a knee-jerk reaction to like any of the,
hang on, if it's true though, it's very damaging. It's very bad. Like if I hope there aren't foreign agents on Canadian soil assassanating Canadians.
Well, but, I definitely hope not in any case. Yeah. But so the contentious thing here is a man named Hardeep Singh Nijjar was killed. He was shot at a Sikh temple. Now he was
months ago.
Yes, months ago. So they haven't caught the people that were allegedly involved. Apparently, it was two heavyset men. They got into a car, so there's a third accomplice that drove them away. Now that being said, we don't know any details. No details have been released yet from the PMO. We thought that if they came with an allegation, there would be more details involved, like who the men were, any of this stuff. Anyway, Hardeep Singh was a member of the Khalistani group, which is a small group of Sikh Indians. Now, the Khalistanis are all Sikh, but not all Sikh are Khalistanis. And this needs to be understood so that people don't go, "Oh, Sikh people are bad," because that's not the case.
No.
And I don't even know much about the Khalistani group, and I'm not going to throw any stones because I don't know, right? Now, the Indian authorities have labeled them a terrorist organization, and that's something that carries some weight here. Now, in Trudeau's last trip to, not this recent one, but in his last trip, he actually brought in his entourage convicted Khalistani, convicted of crimes in Canada. I don't know what crimes he was convicted of. I didn't get into the details of that, but he was in Trudeau's entourage, which is very insulting to the government at the time when he was visiting. So that was seen as a kick in the face. And then this next trip where he was preaching about democracy and all of these things and saying that India needs to clean up their act when all of this is happening here in Canada. Now, again, I'm not throwing any stones and saying anybody's, because the people have been later labeled terrorists, and I don't know enough about it to even comment on that.
Yeah.
But
and Jagmeet Singh, the leader of our national NDP party, is also sympathetic to that group.
That's correct.
Is my understanding.
And he was actually barred from entering India because of his affiliation.
Because of his sympathies to that group. Yeah. And there's lots of videos of him being in meetings with these guys and whatnot. We're not talking about just a handshake when somebody comes to visit you. We're talking going to their meetings kind of thing.
Now, the National Post is writing on this and says, who is this guy? People, it's been claimed that he was a Canadian citizen. Now, his refugee claim was rejected. He came to Canada in 1997, right? He tried to claim refugee status, having used a false passport to enter the country. Now, his refugee status was rejected, but 11 days after that, he married a woman who sponsored him for immigration. Now, immigration officers are not dummies. They saw that and they rejected that too. So that was rejected. Although Nijjar called himself a Canadian citizen, and Trudeau referred to him as such in the House of Commons on Monday. So this is up in the air now. The reports are that he wasn't Canadian, but obviously the politicians are saying that he was Canadian, and obviously for political reasons.
Oh well, I on a lighter note, I had a tweet that 2 days ago or yesterday that went semi-viral in India because I made fun of Prime Minister Trudeau here in Canada, right? So I had a very viral tweet, and then all of a sudden I'm getting all these tweets from people, from Indian citizens, and they're telling me that they have a Trudeau in India, and it's a guy by the name of Gandhi, and I think it's a grandson of Mahatma Gandhi or something like that, and it's one of their opposition politicians who fancies himself an intellectual, blah blah blah. But everybody was laughing, saying that he's a big dummy, and the Indians. But why suddenly I was getting some traction in India was it was interesting because India and Canadian politics are linked right now at this moment. And then Indians were behind the scenes. Indians were laughing at Trudeau. So he's not wealthy. His trip there last week. I mean, is this just pure backlash from last week? I mean, look at what he did. I mean, we expelled the diplomat because of this. We immediately canceled some trade deals. Like it's a big deal, right? Like this is a very serious allegation. If it's done just to distract, it's a bad one. If it's done as a retaliation for something that happened to him in India, it's also a bad one. Like, put your ego aside, dude, and do what's best for the country. And doing something half-assed like this is not good for the country.
Well, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help when we're supposed to be mending. We're the peaceful nation that's supposed to be mending a lot of these divides.
Yep.
Now, India is going right into the BRICS system, and that's not helping us. And creating more of a divide is not going to help us any further down the road. So we should be strengthening our relationships with these countries around the world, with diplomats, not sending them off packing. No, we should be discussing these things and not meddling with the internal affairs of other countries at the same time.
Yeah.
If something happens on our soil, yes, we should deal with that criminally. But again, these are simply allegations at this point.
I mean, India is a country of 1 billion people, or maybe more now.
More than I think it's like
we're not trying he's not trying to push around like I don't know, like Fiji. I mean, he's like you're pushing around India, dude. Like the Brits tried, and the Brits got their noses bloodied out of that country and walked away. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. Yeah, it's an interesting one. He's tanking again in the polls. I just like I said, he's distracting. There's still so much bad news. I mean, it worked what he's doing because nobody talked about inflation this week. Nobody talked about inflation. Nope. Nobody talked about Loblaws. Nobody talked about the CEOs of grocery stores being brought in. All those things nobody talked about.
The interesting thing too is Chrystia Freeland. She went on the circuit to brag about how inflation, because it went down, it was all because of them. It was because of them that it went down.
Their measures.
And they don't want to talk about the fact that they've taken credit for inflation and where it stands, and it's going up. It's going up. So
it went back up.
Take that.
Yeah, the bank announced it yesterday. It went back up to 4%. So when Chrystia Freeland was bragging, it was down to 3.3. Now it's back up to 4%. 4% is twice the target rate. I mean, the Bank of Canada wants to hold it at 2%. We're at 4%. What's interesting when I was looking at those numbers, when you look up again at the basket that makes up the consumer price index, you can see how inflation is coming down on things like home repairs, entertainment, travel. So you can see that Canadians are that's supply and demand, and that's how inflation will get eventually defeated, is that when people are cash strapped, they stop spending. So then prices will come back down. But you can see that right now people are already deferring on what I would call the discretionary money. So the inflation in those discretionary categories is coming down. But if you break out one inflation component, like the housing component, holy smokes, man, the housing component alone is like 6.8%. So that's not, the inflation numbers, they're not gonna, we're a long ways from that 2%. So you're not going to see a lot of liberal, they don't want to talk about that one. There's nothing and their measures, the measures, I mean, when they brought in the 5 presidents of the big grocery chains, that's a joke, man. That's a joke. Like Chrystia Freeland, she was intercepted on the street, and she says something like, "Oh, we're doing everything possible to make life more affordable for Canadians." Like, no, you're not, because if you were, you would get rid of the carbon tax, or you would lower the GST by 1%, or you would increase the personal allowance on. But so don't bullshit us. You're not doing everything possible. You're doing the minimum possible. Well, you're bringing in. So bringing in the guy who's running a business that has a 3% margin.
Yes.
And
so they got rid of the GST in London, I believe it was, for new apartment buildings. So there's a
Apartment buildings.
There's a handful of big construction projects that are going to benefit greatly from this, but not anyone who's normal. They're going to build 2,000 new units, and we'll have them
in the next
5
years.
Yeah,
they said in the next 3 years, and it's a recycled promise.
Yeah.
I mean,
2,000 homes in 2,000 houses or homes for people in 5 years is nothing to shake a stick at. And yes, bringing the grocery store CEOs in to what, wag your finger at them and threaten to raise the prices on groceries by imposing a tax on.
I mean, I had to come to the defense of Loblaws yesterday. Mm-hmm. You know, in the sense, I mean, I just published I just went to the, you know, not a fancy website. I went to Yahoo Finance and I pulled out their second quarter report and I just broke it down. I mean, Loblaws at the end of the day, at the end of a quarter, Loblaws is a company that hires 120,000 employees, pays out $3 billion in salaries and wages in one quarter, and does it and provides it's a 60-year-old company that provides an essential service and does it all with a minuscule margin. I mean, would I invest in a business that makes me a 3% return on investment? Boy, you're on the edge of you know, you're always nervous. And then for them to be brought in, man, if, you know, the Liberals have gone after oil, they've gone after banks, although I think they've eased up on bank. They've gone after just about every, you know, they've gone after farmers, fishermen, you name it. You know who the Liberals haven't gone after? Big Pharma. You want to bring in somebody and slap somebody on the wrist? Bring the president of Pfizer and ask him how come his profits are sky high during the pandemic. Like, everybody's like, you know, oh, well, Loblaws should lower their prices and help everybody out. Whatever. Like, that's more theater. And
well, what I found ridiculous is this is not in anybody's rhetoric when it comes to this. The whole concept of, yeah, they've made more money over the past several years. They've brought more Canadians here. When more people are buying food, you're going to make more money. You're going to sell more food. I mean, it's just a margins game at that point.
The numbers are just big. I mean, it's easy to pick on a company like Loblaws because on the surface they made, you know, they had $14 billion in revenue in one quarter. And so it looks like, but at the end of the day, they made, you know, their profit margin, they paid 193. I know the numbers. I looked at the numbers yesterday. So in one quarter, Loblaws paid $193 million in taxes. So after all said and done, they were left with $500 million that they can redistribute to their shareholders. But most of that $500 million gets reinvested. And so, and if you want them to lower that, if the government wants to tax that last 500 million that they're allowed to keep, it looks like a big number, but that'd be like, you know, wanting to tax me because I still managed to take home $5 at the end of the day. It's like, you got to let me take home something, right? And then just to put it into context, I wanted to put it into context. You know, how fast the $500 million that was left over, how fast do you think our federal government would spend that in?
Minutes.
If that last you're close. It's a little more than minutes, but it's 6 hours. So the federal government spends, the federal budget is $400 billion. And out of that $400 billion, there's $40 billion just in interest payment. Just the Canadian government pays $40 billion in interest. But so when you look at our Canadian budget, we spend $400 billion. So it's $1 billion a day, right? Ballpark. It's $1 billion too. The federal government spends $1.2 billion a day. So if they get an extra $500 million out of Loblaws, that's 6 hours of spending for the federal government.
They need to rein that in. They need to stop.
The government has to rein in the spending. They have to rein in the spending. Lord knows, like, do not go. I mean, am I upset at food prices? Yes, I'm upset at food prices, but I understand where the food price, but I'm way more upset at the government than I am at Loblaws.
Yeah, because they're perpetuating it. They're not stopping the cause of the ailment here. And you got to get at the cancer. You got to get at the root of what's going on. And the cancer is their spending, and they can't get off of it.
Yeah, and when I was talking about Loblaws, it was funny. Like, some people just don't. Like, one lady came at, I engaged with the lady who was talking about, well, it doesn't make sense. I can buy butter at this place, but the butter somewhere else is cheaper. And to that lady, I'm like, well, you got two things here. Go buy the cheaper butter. Don't worry about it. So why do you need a law why do you need to force that guy to bring his price down? You can do it yourself. Go buy the butter from the guy who's cheaper. Problem solved.
Yeah.
But the second problem, the funny one, is you picked a bad item, because butter, poultry, eggs, cheese are already controlled by the government. So, if we didn't have those cartels, trust me, the price of milk would be a lot cheaper, and so would butter. I mean, when you travel to the US and you see that big jug of milk for $1, you go, wow, what are we paying? I don't even want to know. Don't answer.
Okay, I won't answer, but I'm sure a lot of people will put that in the comments.
Hey, last story maybe, but again, how talk about a distraction. I even caught myself. What's happening to Tamara and Chris?
Well, it's being drug out. It's being drug out.
Yeah.
A lot of people are not covering it. Of course, I've been covering all these other stories. Well, I'm not ignoring what's going on, but I've been waiting for some real news to come out of that. Essentially, what the court is doing is they seem to just be dragging their heels. They have a series, I think 10 witnesses. They've only gotten through 2, I believe, at this point. It's really slow. I know Tamara and Chris they're in good spirits. They don't have any fears that anything's gonna go wrong for them in this case. They're obviously hoping for no guilty plea or a guilty verdict. Obviously they're not pleading guilty. They keep trying to go at them. Hey, would you just plea out? Would you plea out? We want you to be guilty. It looks like there won't be. It would be very difficult to prove the state's case.
We saw slightly related to that here, Pastor Art Pazlowski, who got acquitted. Well, not acquitted. Sorry, he was found guilty. He was found guilty of mischief, and so his charge of mischief it coincided. The judge gave him exactly the time that he had served, so gave him a sentence of 60 days, and then so
he comes out of it with a record. And I think that Tamara and Chris are trying to get out of this case without a record, without the record, because that would be conceding to the government in the way that they wanted.
I'm not saying it's a victory. Like our Pastor Arthur losing was not a victory. I mean, it's he got convicted of mischief, which is too bad. Hey, I mean, well, let's think back. Remember last week we were talking, I was like, how could this world how could Canada get crazier? Well, I on my bingo card, I did not have, we will accuse another country of assassinating people on our land. I didn't have that one on my bingo card, Clyde. I don't know, what's next week going to bring, right? This week was weird. This was a good week. Did not have that one.
Unbelievable. I'm glad I was able to attend that Million March down in Vancouver. You were there in Calgary. I'm sure a lot of the people on the channel are also attendees at different places all throughout Canada. So I'm glad that there was a turnout. I'm glad that people were so friendly. It was a wholesome ordeal, and I really had a good time.
Yeah, and your viewers we're preaching to the choir. Don't believe the mainstream media when they say there was nobody there or that it was violent. Absolutely not. It was extremely well attended, and it was very peaceful. Absolutely.
And it was diverse.
Diverse. Yes, diverse.
Unbelievable. Marty, where can people find you on the internet?
Marty Up North on Twitter, and a little bit of Marty Up North on YouTube. I'm so slack on YouTube. Kudos to you, man. I'm way behind. In fact, I'm about 3 videos behind on YouTube, and I'm taking off on Friday to do a hike. So I'll probably publish more videos on YouTube this winter when I get to catch up and I'm not outdoors. I'm just not keeping up on my non-political content. Too busy with politics.
Fair enough. Well, links as always in the description down below.
Cheers, folks.